Hello everyone and good evening. I'm Don Arleth and welcome to our main edition of World News Tonight here on TVP World. Tonight we'll focus on funds from the EU recovery plan, almost a third of which have been contracted. In total, Poland will receive almost 60 billion euros. This is a huge achievement for the ruling coalition. But before we get to that story, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. While thousands of Russian soldiers have been cut off and are trapped in the Kursk region, the situation on Ukraine's eastern front remains dire. Both sides are evacuating civilians. Kamala Harris will accept the Democratic Party's nomination for president at the four-day Democratic National Convention. Flooded streets, downed trees, and damaged roofs. A night of heavy rain and storms is behind us here in Poland, leaving destruction in its wake. We start off tonight with money for Poland from the EU recovery plan, which is estimated to boost the Polish economy by about 2%. It was announced today that the contracts have been signed for about a third of the projects under the fund, which in total is worth nearly 60 billion euros. Poland has been waiting for this money since the pandemic, but because of a dispute between Warsaw and Brussels over the rule of law, the funds were withheld.
15 such hybrid buses have been purchased by the Słupsk County in northern Poland. The driving force behind the decision was the need to reduce emissions.
Mobility is extremely important to us. We manage a network of over 700 kilometers of county roads. They are our investment priority. We spend a lot of money on them, as well as on the development of public transport in our region, thermal modernization, improving the quality of the environment, water management. These are also key points.
The buses were purchased with funds from the National Recovery Fund, one of the key parts of a larger program, Next Generation EU. Its main idea is to help countries affected by the COVID-19 pandemic to rebuild their economies. It concentrates on innovation, environment, digitalization, education, and health. This empty lot in Bydgoszcz will soon be home to a daycare center. What's unusual is that the local authorities won't have to spend a penny on it. Most of the cost will be covered by the National Recovery Plan.
This is the first time ever that we've had a situation where we've had an investment that can be completely financed by external funds. So we're really happy and grateful that there is such a program and that we can benefit from such large funds.
Applications for the next two stages of the program will be submitted by September 13. The total amount that Poland can receive from the program is 60 billion euros.
We haven't contracted two-thirds yet. However, we have contracted a third, which is already a huge success, considering that half a year ago we had all the funds from the recovery plan blocked.
When we took over the government, we found ourselves in a situation of missed opportunity. Our predecessors did not apply for payment. They did not meet the provisions they had committed themselves to, and as a result, they could not access funds from the National Recovery Plan. And all of this came to a standstill at a time when the Polish economy desperately needed this money.
For the local authorities, the beneficiaries of the program, a race against time has begun. And there are fears that they won't make, but they promise to do everything they can to ensure that not a penny is wasted.
A lot of money available, and the limitation in different areas, and particularly time, which was in previous years lost without gaining those funds.
The National Recovery Plan funds for Poland had been blocked by the European Commission due to a judicial crisis in the country. After the October 2023 elections, the Commission decided to unblock the funds as the new government began working on reforms to restore the rule of law in the country.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has stopped making public statements about the situation in Kursk, according to the independent Russian website, the Moscow Times. Ukrainians are achieving further successes in the area. However, the situation in Donetsk is quite different. Residents of the strategically important city of Pokrovsk have been ordered to evacuate. Russian forces could take the city in the next 1 to 2 weeks.
92 settlements and 1,200 square kilometers. This is how much Russian land Kyiv claims control over.
We continue to strengthen our positions, stabilize designated areas, and replenish our exchange fund for Ukraine. This operation has become our largest investment in the process of liberating Ukrainian men and women from Russian captivity.
This map shows the Ukrainian-controlled areas of Russia's Kursk region. The most recent clashes occurred in the north and southeast parts of the area. Footage posted by the Ukrainian Air Force today shows a Ukrainian fighter jet carrying out an airstrike on a Russian control center in the Kursk region.
It would act as a buffer zone and a morale booster for Ukrainians after the failure of last year's counteroffensive, and also have a tremendous impact on sowing dissent and divisions inside Russia.
The Kremlin has shown propaganda reports of the evacuation of its residents. According to Moscow, 120,000 people have already been evacuated, but these figures are difficult to verify. Ukrainians are organizing humanitarian aid for Russian civilians, which is another blow to Putin's image.
I don't think that Vladimir Putin would want to show himself to be weak by agreeing to some sort of exchange of territory, this region of Kursk in exchange for, say, somewhere in the southeast of Ukraine, which is occupied by Russia since 2022.
Evacuations have affected Ukrainians as well. Kyiv recently made the difficult decision to evacuate Pokrovsk in the Donbas region, where Russia is making gains.
In the Pokrovsk and Toretsk sections, it's a difficult situation, but the guys are doing everything to destroy the occupier.
More than 500 people are leaving the city each day.
The Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada has passed a law that would ban the Russian Orthodox Church. Its head, Patriarch Kirill, has openly supported the Russian invasion of Ukraine. For more on this, we now move to our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee. Hello, Oz. Now, what do you know about this decision, and what are the consequences that it could have?
So this is something the Zelensky administration has been planning for some time. I think it will be quite a popular decision here in Ukraine as well, with recent polling showing that 82% of Ukrainians don't trust the Russia-linked Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And it must be stressed that the vast majority of Ukrainians are Orthodox Christians, but many of them have switched over their allegiance to an independent church, the Independent Orthodox Church. So this is about the Russia-backed Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is linked to the Russian Orthodox Church. And it's something, as I said, the Zelensky administration has been planning for some time. Authorities here have called it a historic rupture, with Zelensky going on the record about it today. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about it.
Today, I want to note the work of the Verkhovna Rada. A law on our spiritual independence has been adopted. This is what we talked about with the members of the Council of Churches and Religious Organizations. And in a few days, I will also speak with representatives of the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. We will continue to strengthen Ukraine, our society.
So the authorities here have blamed the Moscow-linked Ukrainian Orthodox Church of abetting the Russian invasion. And indeed, there have been many investigations into the activities of certain of these churches. Now, this law is not sweeping. It doesn't come into effect immediately. And this is a much more complicated issue because each of these Orthodox churches in Ukraine decides its own independent affiliation. Therefore, what will happen next is many of these churches that are still linked to the Moscow-backed church will have about 9 months in which they have to decide how they proceed, with the idea being that all of the activities of any Moscow-linked religious organization will be banned on the territory of Ukraine going forward.
Right. Well, it certainly seems inevitable. Long time coming. Oz Chatterjee reporting live for us from Kyiv. Thank you very much. Israel has backed a Gaza ceasefire deal tabled by the U.S., but Hamas branded the proposed plan as a means of, quote, buying time for Israel to continue its genocide. This comes amid the first reported case of polio in the Gaza Strip.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said yes to the so-called bridging proposal, which lays down the terms of a Gaza armistice and hostage release, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has announced. Now the ball is in Hamas's court, as the U.S. is pressing for a ceasefire.
In a very constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu today, he confirmed to me that Israel accepts the bridging proposal, that he supports it. It's now incumbent on Hamas to do the same.
Yet Hamas has lambasted the proposal, saying it at times contradicts what Joe Biden had put forth previously.
Biden's proposal states that Israel would entirely retreat in 2 phases and also proposes a complete ceasefire, whereas the Israeli demands include only a temporary ceasefire for 6 weeks, Israeli forces remaining in the Netzarim corridor and inspecting those returning to the north, which means restricting aid to Israeli approval.
But the U.S. Secretary of State remains somewhat optimistic. Earlier today, he visited Egypt and Qatar to talk Gaza. Alongside the U.S., the 2 countries serve as intermediaries in the Israel-Hamas peace talks.
These are our 2 critical partners in this effort to get the ceasefire agreement over the finish line, to get the hostages home, to put everyone on a better path to lasting peace and security.
All this comes amid the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. 3 days ago, the region saw the first case of polio, a disease that tallied tens of thousands of cases in the 1980s to now find itself on the verge of eradication with a mere dozen cases worldwide in 2023. But the high risk of polio re-emergence might lead to the lifelong plight of tens of thousands of children, says humanitarian activist and polio survivor Janina Ochojska.
We will have children with polio, which demand a big effort of the nation, of the state, to create for them the possibilities to have a normal life. And in Gaza now it is impossible.
To curb the potential spread of polio, the United Nations is slated to launch a vaccine campaign which will involve over 600,000 children in Gaza. But even that won't suffice.
The ultimate vaccine for polio is peace and an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
Peace negotiations between Israel and Hamas held last week in the Qatari capital of Doha adjourned without a breakthrough last week, but the talks are set to resume this week. This is widely regarded by officials as the last opportunity to secure an armistice agreement, but that coming to fruition still seems far off as the conflict continues to fester. Earlier today, at least 10 Palestinians were killed after an Israeli strike on a school sheltering displaced families in Gaza City.
Now let's move across the Atlantic, where the Democratic National Convention, or the DNC, is in full swing following the event's opening night. Leaders and top politicians from the Democratic Party took to the stage to cover the most pressing issues ahead of the presidential election, including domestic and foreign policy.
We hereby call the in-person portion of the 49th Quadrennial Democratic National Convention to order.
With a strike of the gavel, the DNC officially kicked off. U.S. President Joe Biden used the event to effectively pass the blue baton on to his VP and Democrat presidential candidate Kamala Harris, reassuring everyone that his former running mate is perfectly capable of handling the volatile climate the world has found itself in.
Just as no commander-in-chief should ever bow down to a dictator, the way Trump bows down to Putin. I never have, and I promise you, Kamala Harris will never do it. Will never bow down.
Experts like Tanya Domi, who has experienced the atmosphere at the DNC firsthand, also say that Kamala Harris is not only committed to aiding Ukraine in its efforts to defend itself from Russian aggression. She is also very favorable of keeping NATO's eastern flank and Washington's allies overseas strong.
At least up until Trump, it was a bipartisan approach to NATO and support of NATO because NATO was constructed and conceived of and led by its establishment, was led by the United States. It remains that tradition in the Democratic Party. There's no question about it.
When we fight, we win.
However, whether or not she'll be able to back up her talk is still up in the air. While the latest polls show Harris nearly 3% of support ahead of her Republican counterpart, Donald Trump, the result of the November elections could see either candidate win, depending on how the crucial swing states vote. Despite this, her chances of winning the race are quite large.
I think she's moved the electoral map around, and it could end up being a significant win in the Electoral College. It's highly possible. It looks very good. She has reversed the Biden disadvantage.
The convention will run until Thursday this week, giving Democrats plenty of time to answer the questions most often posed by their voters, including abortion rights and the presidential candidate's approach to the crisis in the Middle East.
Back here in Europe, the Bulgarian political crisis continues. President Rumen Radev rejected the last caretaker government late last night, effectively postponing the upcoming elections. Bulgaria hasn't managed to form a regular government for the last 3 years.
The elections, scheduled for October 20th, would be the 7th elections in Bulgaria since 2022. President Radev opposes the appointment of the same interior minister as before, Kalin Stoyanov. He argues that the elections wouldn't be fair under Stoyanov's management. That's why he refused to accept the caretaker government on Monday. Bulgaria is unable to step out of the political crisis as no party has managed to gain majority in the parliament for the past 3 years. Just before the latest snap elections in June, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warned against the rise of far-right groups in the region.
Whether it is the AfD in Germany or the Rassemblement National in France, whether it is Konfederacja in Poland or Vazhrashtina here in Bulgaria, the names may be different, but their goal is the same. They want to trample on our values and they want to destroy our Europe. And we, the EPP and GAP, will not let this happen.
The Balkan country has been struggling with its past connections to Russia and the Soviet Union. Some parties wish to stay away from Moscow's influence, while others want to see Bulgaria benefit from the Kremlin's support.
Huge storms over Poland caused massive floods in the last 24 hours, especially here in Warsaw. Major roads are blocked, including one leading to the Chopin Airport. The fire department has recorded more than 2,500 storm-related incidents across the country.
Blocked roads are not the only problem for Warsaw. The rooftop of a shopping mall collapsed under the weight of the water on Tuesday. Within 24 hours, twice as much rain fell in the capital than the average rainfall for the entire month of August. Some garages in the capital were completely filled with water, like at this residential complex. The Polish fire department warns that we should take the storms seriously.
During storms, there are a number of dangers, like lightning and strong winds, which can make trees fall over. That's why we ask people to avoid finding shelter under the trees. You better hide inside buildings.
According to climatologist Rafał Maszewski, massive storms will become increasingly common due to the warming of the planet.
In our part of Europe, we'll be experiencing more intense storms. The temperatures are rising, there is more steam coming from the ground, and hence we have more powerful storms. Heavy rains can become more of a problem for Poland due to climate change.
The Polish Meteorological Institute has said the abnormal storm over Warsaw was the result of the warm air from the east meeting the colder winds from the west.
While there are no earthquakes or hurricanes in Poland, major storms can still be a huge issue. As you can see behind me, Polish firemen are still working hard day and night to remove the effects of these weather conditions. From Poland, Warsaw, TVP World, Kazimierz Łysiak.
Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, will land on Polish soil shortly, marking the first visit of an Indian Prime Minister to Poland in nearly half a century. After his visit to Warsaw, the Indian head of government is set to visit the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv.
Narendra Modi's visit to Poland falls on the 70th anniversary of the establishing of diplomatic relations between Warsaw and New Delhi, with the last visit of an Indian PM taking place in 1979. While the occasion is most definitely festive, the visit isn't only meant to commemorate the date. In the words of the Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, Warsaw is hoping to tighten its cooperation with India in a few key sectors.
This includes cooperation in the economic sector, cooperation in developing and researching new technologies. We want to strengthen this cooperation. Poland needs a lasting partnership with India.
Narendra Modi's trip to Central Eastern Europe isn't all roses, however. After his stay in Warsaw, the Indian PM will make his way to Kyiv, where he will meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. While friendly on the surface, India's relationship with Ukraine soured after the South Asian country's PM continued fostering good relations with Moscow, Ukraine's invader. Despite his apparent friendship with Vladimir Putin, the Indian Prime Minister has on many occasions criticized the killing of innocent Ukrainians by Russian forces, even to the Muscovite warmonger's face.
When there are wars, battles, or even militant attacks, every person who believes in humanity feels pain when they see death, especially when innocent children are killed. The sight of innocent children dying shatters your heart, and that pain is extremely horrific. I have discussed this issue with you at length.
The Indian Prime Minister is set to officially begin his visit to Poland on Thursday, meeting the country's Prime Minister Donald Tusk and President Andrzej Duda, after which he will steel himself for a bittersweet reunion with the Ukrainian people.
And now joining me to discuss exactly what we can expect from this visit, which kicks off on Wednesday, is Piotr Kłodowski, professor at the Jagiellonian University. Hello, sir, and thank you very much for joining us on World News Tonight.
So good evening, and thank you very much for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure. Now, this visit, first one from the head of state of India in almost half a century, seems to be important considering that India is the most populous country in the world right now. But concerning this, first he will come to Warsaw, he will meet with Prime Minister Donald Tusk, and then he will meet with President Andrzej Duda. From a Polish perspective, what do you think are going to be the most important issues on the agenda during this official state visit?
Well, if you had asked me this question around 5 years ago, I would have said that definitely strengthening our bilateral relations would be our top priority. And especially when we look at the numbers when it comes to business, we need more investments from India. And also Polish companies should be more interested in investing in India. But nowadays, after the unprovoked aggression of Russia on Ukraine, the situation has changed. So definitely we are very much interested in India's role in the process of building stable peace relations in Central Europe and in Eastern Europe. Yes, India may become some sort of a peacemaker between Ukraine and Russia. It is what Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, has been talking about for quite a long time. Well, we were very much disappointed when Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Vladimir Putin a month ago, and that was a very warm welcome organized by Putin in Moscow. Yes, we are fully aware of the fact that India wants to maintain very close relations with Russia, and India has been buying crude oil at a very discounted price. And in this way, India somehow is contributing to Russian war efforts. But at the same time, India wants to be a Vishwaguru. So that's a Sanskrit word which means the guru of the world. So India is very much interested in building a very stable and peaceful world. And Narendra Modi, he has met with Putin on several occasions. yes, he wants to maintain still very close relations with Moscow, but at the same time, during the last visit, he was very much criticized in the United States, in Europe, in the European Union, also in Poland. So that's why I believe he made that decision to visit Ukraine and to project himself as a responsible politician who wants to sit at the high table, as a politician who wants to contribute to building very, very prosperous world, the world of peace, and he intends to make every possible effort to bring peace between Ukraine and Russia. How well likely is it just to be successful right here? It is very hard to say. But anyway, India seems to be a very reliable partner for Russia. India also has been building very strong relations with the United States. India is quite well perceived in the European Union. So that might be a peace broker in the eyes of many global players. So we believe that India has a very big role to play in the process of building stable relations, not only in our part of the world, but also in the Indo-Pacific region as well.
Right, and especially with the situation concerning China and China's support of Russia during this unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Therefore, I think India could fulfill a special role. The question is whether Warsaw, which has been a fantastic advocate of Ukraine for a long time now, whether Warsaw is going to be able to prime Prime Minister Modi to go to Kyiv and have some kind of successful talks. From that side, what do you think Kyiv's going to want to express to the Indian Prime Minister?
Well, I suppose that Kyiv is very much interested not only in bringing India to, well, its side, because that's very unlikely. But I believe that when our Foreign Minister Kuleba paid a visit to India a couple of months before, he was very much interested in explaining the consequences of the war to India. And, well, we also have to remember what Secretary Blinken said a year ago, that it was Delhi and Beijing, so India and China, those countries persuaded Putin not to use any tactical nuclear bombs against Ukraine. We don't know much about possible negotiations between Delhi and Moscow or Beijing and Moscow, but most possibly it was Delhi and Beijing which contributed or which dissuaded Putin from using, well, this terrible weapon. Well, Ukraine might be also interested in India's participating in rebuilding Ukraine after the war. We don't know precisely when the war may end. But yes, Ukrainians are fully aware that India has become a very global player with a very strong economy. And also Prime Minister Modi, I believe, he wants also to express his gratitude for so-called, Operation Ganga. So around 20,000 Indian students, they had lived in Ukraine before the war broke out. And they were successfully evacuated from Ukraine, also with the Polish assistance. Well, I suppose that Ukraine might have a much broader perspective because Kyiv also realizes that India cannot just cut off its ties with Moscow. That is not possible. And we know it as well because, we need to look at the situation, as a kind of a triangle, Moscow, Beijing, and Delhi. Because if Delhi somehow reduces its contacts with Moscow, that could mean that Beijing will build much stronger relations with Russia.
Right,
And
which
of
is
course
something that
yeah.
India would not welcome in any which way. Well, Professor Kwiatkowski, professor at Jagiellonian University, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us and talking about this important issue. We'll be following these developments as they come along. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thanks for watching, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.